Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present some work that's been happening at Bloomfield Hospital in Orange over the last few years in just trialling the circuits program that Till has been talking about this morning. So I thought I'd start with where we come from, and New South Wales and the central west of New South Wales in particular. We're based in Orange, which has got the red circle in the middle there, and our district includes Bathurst and Dubbo. Orange is a 250 kilometre drive west of here, and we're a regional centre with 40,000 people. At the hospital, so mental health hospital, we have acute rehabilitation and forensic wards, and we also have a community mental health service in Orange town itself. And so Orange, both the inpatient and the community setting, were the settings for our implementation trial of the circuits program. So what I'd like to talk about is the background and aims to our implementation trial. The method, give you a quick overview. We used a mixed method to this, quantitative and qualitative, and I'll show you results in both of those areas. Talk through some of the results of our trial, which we've published in 2 papers, and talk briefly about future directions, and we'll have some time for discussion. So in some ways, putting the meat on the bones with circuits in our rural and inpatient environment. So how did we come to trial this program? With a career doing cognitive assessment in brain injury rehabilitation, and then moving into working in inpatient mental health rehab, one of the things I think that people like me experience is this strong desire to move from assessment to what can we do about this and do some remediation. And I found myself in a team, a multidisciplinary team, that had a real interest in looking for, identifying and trialling a program that might be effective in our setting to be able to provide cognitive remediation with people with schizophrenia. So we did a whip round literature review looking at different options of programs, and this is sort of 2015-16 when we were doing this, and found the circuits program. And our path included finding Frances Dark in Brisbane, who was already using the program, and she was incredibly supportive, and then the team at King's College, their support as well. And along the way, we won a first round grant from the Ministry of Health in New South Wales for $170,000, and that supported us then to conduct an implementation trial of the circuits program in our context. And I just am reminded with that photo, there's Frances there, and Matteo Cello, who came over from King's. This is a couple of years ago. We ran a 2-day expo just to share what we were doing with other interested people from around the state. We had about 70 people come to that. And this is such a team effort. So this was our trial team. So just basic rationale for why we would trial circuits. The current treatment guidelines recommend cognitive remediation therapy in Australia and New Zealand. And we found that there was certainly evidence, and Till's covered that brilliantly this morning. It's a done deal, I think she said. There's enough evidence to suggest we should be using a program like this. There's RCTs, there's implementation trials, there's some cost-benefit analyses as well. We were also very fortunate in that we were able to trial King's College's comprehensive online therapist training, and I think we were the guinea pigs. Yep. And that is something that our therapists really valued, and is one of the themes in the qualitative analysis of therapists' experiences that we've published. So I'll talk briefly about what circuits involves. I think Till's already covered this pretty well, but it's a web-based animated cognitive remediation therapy program, and this graphic just gives a sense of the feel of that program. It's colourful, it's quite vibrant, there's some groovy guitar music, it's quite engaging. Just an overview in a slide. So developed by King's College, Till Week's team. Our participants could take a standard or advanced journey. and the machine selects the tasks in a sense and presents those tasks on the computer. Participants complete 3 sessions a week, ideally, of up to an hour in each session. It takes 30, 40 sessions to complete one of those journeys over 3 months. And it uses evidence-based training techniques, which Till has talked about. There are 36 different real-life and abstract tasks and 14 levels of difficulty. Till's not staring at me, telling me I'm wrong, so I'm going to go with that. So it's got that sense of graded difficulty where people are doing similar tasks and they're getting more difficult and they're learning what their strengths and difficulties are on those tasks and learning to apply strategies as things become more and more difficult. So the targets, Till spent most of her talk talking about metacognition, so I won't get into that in a big way, but really the therapeutic target is to develop people's understanding of their strengths and limits, capabilities with cognition and use of effective strategies. So strategies they find effective to achieve the tasks that are presented and then transfer that learning into real life. Things like cognitive flexibility, memory and planning are the targets here, but we're also seeing really good effects in motivation and self-efficacy, and I'm going to talk through a case study at the end of this where you can see that as people achieve greater mastery of tasks that matter to them, their confidence improves and that sense of I can do it starts to improve and people start to take a risk, have a go at things, and that gets into a bit of a positive spiral effect. So I just had some slides to show you some examples of some of the tasks, and this is an abstract task. Looks a little bit like a cognitive test in some ways, and what goes on with this is you can see the alphabet at the top and each letter has its own symbol and there's a little message in the middle there and you've got to decode that symbol. So this is going to tap into various cognitive functions along the lines of working memory, selective attention, being able to find the right symbol and knowing where you're up to as you decode this, so just following along. This is more of a real-life task and a bit like the one that Till showed where there was a mobile phone message, but there's some text on the left and that's John's CV, and John's looking for a job. John's found 2 job vacancies and the task here is to read and understand the salient points out of that CV on the left in order to make a decision about which job is best for John. And the Circuits program provides a number of strategies to help with this. And one of those is one that Till showed before, which is a highlighter. So as the person reads through the CV, they can put some pink on salient points and that will help them to remember the sorts of things that John has experience in or is looking for and help them to make the decision then about which job is the best one for John. So I wanted to reiterate and reinforce that this is not a computer game, and certainly that's been our experience. This is not something that people can just sit at without a therapist and tick boxes and hope to get some gain from. This is a proper therapy. And I, in providing supervision to therapists, think about this as being, within 5 domains, this therapy. Firstly, assessment of people's functioning. And we did some assessment and I'll show you some of the outcomes as we move through the talk. Off that assessment of cognitive functioning and of functioning in everyday life, so independence, adaptive functioning. Circuits therapists are taught how to conduct a formulation of the case, which then leads to setting specific recovery-based goals. And Till mentioned the COG-SMART approach, and I spend a lot of time with therapists helping them to set goals that are realistic, achievable, and with a cognitive focus so that they are then able to use the time with the computer, which is that 4th stage which is target metacognition, and the dialogue between the therapist and the patient or service user is really focused then on helping people to understand their functioning and to develop use of strategies that are really appropriate to the goals that they have, make use of that time in front of the computer. And then where we're always heading is towards transfer then of the effective use of those strategies into real life. Circuits therapy provides a range of things that help people to engage. It's a personalised process, and it really is. We've found it good in exercising different areas of cognition. It provides tools for encouraging self-reflection, as Till talked about and showed you through those sort of pre-task and post-task reflection screens. And it promotes transfer by its very nature, where it initially provides a lot of scaffolding to an individual, and the therapist does a lot of hand-holding and working with the person to ensure that they're getting success on tasks. But as people get more and more experience, that sort of scaffolding can come away and people become more independent, doing homework tasks on their own, going off to do transfer of using strategies in real world on their own and coming back and talking about that, so that by the end of their program, they're as independent as they can be. So let's talk about our trial research. Our aim was to evaluate pilot implementation, and this program hadn't been implemented in New South Wales, not in a rural setting and not in an inpatient setting. So we were really interested in feasibility, acceptability and clinical outcomes, as well as patient and therapist experience. We got data at pre-circuits, so within 5 sessions, at completion of circuits, and then some follow-up data which I can share with you. We've written it up in 2 papers. The first one is mercifully short. I was given a 1,000-word limit initially, so that one's fairly succinct, and I'll just talk through the results of the trial from that today with you. And the second paper then is a qualitative analysis of therapists' experiences. We just had an opportunity, we had ethics approval and consent from therapists. They all got up and spoke at our expo about their experiences of the circuits program and what it's meant for their practice in mental health rehab. So we did a qualitative analysis off a video recording of that and wrote that up and got that published towards the end of last year. In summary, we thought we had very good engagement from most participants. Most people said they enjoyed doing the program, and really good goal attainment. They made good improvements in daily functioning, and I'll show you some group changes, and if we have time I'll show you the case study. And therapists reported benefiting from the training that they had in particular, and in gaining job satisfaction from their role as a circuits therapist. So the people involved in our trial, there were 53 in total, and you can see 48 males. Reason for that is that most of our therapists worked in male inpatient rehab. Most were inpatients. We only had 8 in the community. We actually sent therapists from the inpatient environment to the community in order to do the therapy. And you can see mean age 34. At the time that we shut off our data collection and did the analysis for this, 68% had completed the standard or advanced journey, thank you, or were in progress towards it. So just to give you a sense of the level of functioning, Till finished off saying she thought that this was a program that could be targeting people of lower functioning, and that was certainly the group that we had in our trial. This is RBANS, which is a well-used cognitive measure, where the population mean is 100 and standard deviation is 15. So you can see that people were having some real difficulties with aspects of memory on that measure. And then the ABAS-3 is a gold standard, a measure of independent functioning, highly reliable measure. And you can see that people are below the 2nd percentile in the extremely low range there on average. So that's the starting point there. So this is just to run quickly through engagement, goal attainment, and then I'll show you some outcomes. Most participants, so 91%, indicated they liked the program. People that said they didn't like it said it reminded them too much of school. And there were a number of people that had like 0 computer use experience, and it was like overwhelming, just the sense of I have to use a computer. So they dodged it. Mean number of sessions, I think this is interesting. 27 sessions was the mean. Standard deviation is quite high, and you can see that it ranged from 1 to 71 sessions. I'm not sure if the guy who did 71 sessions is still going. He might be. We've all gone home, but he's still going. The goal attainment was really good. So at time 2, which is the end of the program, a goal attainment score of 0 means 10 out of 10, you've achieved your goal to expectations. And our mean was positive 0.5 then. And for those who we got follow-up data from 3 months after the program, that was close to 1.0, which is better than expected. This is a graph here which I'll explain, which shows the effects and changes on both the R bands at the top and the ABAS-3, which is functional independence at the bottom, on those index scores between time 1 and 2. So the red vertical lines are the time 1 means, and the blue lines are the time 2 means. You can see that this graph's arranged with 100 right over on the left. So that's the middle of the population. That's the average of the population. And you can see the ranges across the bottom axis there. So the R bands is showing that people are starting below the second percentile on immediate memory and in the bottom of the borderline range on things like delayed memory and attention, and that the visuospatial and language skills start closer to the average range. And what I've written on there is ES is effect size, and then there's an arrow with a proportion, and that's the proportion of people in the group of 31 who had time 1 and 2 data for us, who made an improvement between time 1 and 2. When you look at the ABAS-3, and I think this is the interesting part, and it really ties into what Till was saying before, where people are quite low functioning to begin with, this provides quite a top-up. So very strong effects and a high proportion of people making gains. And that gain goes from below the second percentile to around the 16th percentile, or around the top end of the borderline low end, or bottom end of the low average range. And that's got me thinking about that sort of transition potential to lower intensity models of care. But I think we need to do a bit more work looking at this. We only had 7 people at the time we shut off our data collection for this trial, giving us 3-month follow-up data. And you can see that the R bands is quite variable. But on the ABAS-3, there's some strong sustained effects. I have a case study, if I have time, which I'll whiz through in a couple of minutes. 1 minute, all right. This is the case of a young man who's 24, who'd been in inpatient care for several years by the time he came to do circuits. And to describe his functioning, he was extremely impulsive, poor concentration, and had a real disorganisation. The OT took him to the supermarket, gave him a list of 6 items initially, and he spent 20 minutes in the supermarket. With great difficulty, he found 1 item and said, I just can't do this. At the time, his social interaction was really poor, and he'd had great difficulty living in the community, and so had been in hospital for maybe 4 years by the time he came to do circuits. His goals were to live in the community. He hated living in hospital, and he wanted to be able to plan, organise and complete travel, budget, shop for himself, cook, travel and engage in daytime activities, all pretty normal stuff. He wanted to improve concentration and memory to understand what people said to him. He wanted to learn when and how to ask for help. When we started with circuits with him, he was a fella that would click the go button before he understood the instructions. And in some ways that was what his whole life was like. He would find himself in situations that he didn't understand what was going on and didn't know how to fix that. During circuits, he developed new insight into his function. He learned what worked and didn't work for him, so effective use of strategies. And they're very simple strategies like writing information down and talking through plans with others. He was able to transfer that to budgeting, to travel training, and to shopping independently. At the end of the program, he could shop independently and get 20 items off a list. He needed help to get to the shop, and he needed help to get home. But he learnt to use strategies to enable him to do that task. So you can imagine what that did to his confidence. He slowed down. He didn't act impulsively as he did at the end of the program. He could judge when he did or didn't understand something or needed help, and he would ask for help and receive it when he needed it. He learnt that he could do that. He developed self-efficacy motivation to engage, and he initiated daily tasks like washing up and social interaction. In fact, his mother said to our team, "What have you done to my boy?" He came from a large family that would have a big extended family lunch every weekend, And his mother said normally he would stay in his room, but he's out and he's talking to everyone. So after circuits, able to concentrate for periods up to 60 minutes. We were doing 60-minute sessions towards the end, routinely reading instructions before starting, initiating requests for help, able to follow verbal and written instructions. In fact, to cut to the chase, he moved out of hospital. He's living in a supported group home and engaging in daytime activities. So where are we going with this? And I'll be quick. We've got to the point where we think from our trial that circuits is both feasible and acceptable in our inpatient and community contexts. We think circuits offers excellent opportunities to engage people with schizophrenia in rehab and has helped produce very good outcomes. So we're in the process of upscaling to offer this program across our community teams in Dubbo, Orange and Bathurst, and establish a community of practice to support new therapists across the state and beyond. I would really like to see the system support this kind of therapy and be able to fund it so that it becomes distributed and available. And I'd be interested in doing some more research looking at longer term outcomes and the health economics of the therapy. Thanks.